I've spent 23 years asking people to remember things they'd rather forget. That's what detective work really is. Convincing strangers to open doors in their minds they boarded shut. A husband who can't recall where he was Thursday night. A mother who doesn't remember the bruises. Memory is selective. It protects us from truths we're not ready to face. My name is Luke Brennan, and I'm good at what I do because I understand something most people don't. The brain is a liar. It edits. It revises. It creates narratives that help us survive the things that should have destroyed us. I learned this the hard way. 3 months ago, I took a case in Solvang Ridge, a forgotten pocket of San Diego County with a population that hovers around 1,000. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the gas station doubles as the grocery store, where strangers are noticed immediately. The sheriff's department there is 2 people, Sheriff Dwight Hackett and Deputy Ramona Voss. When they get something they can't handle, they call in help. They called me about missing persons. A woman and her daughter vanished without a trace. I drove out there on a Wednesday morning, the desert highway stretching ahead like a promise of emptiness. My hands were steady on the wheel. My mind was clear. I remember thinking this would be straightforward. Probably a custody dispute, maybe domestic trouble. Small towns hide big secrets, but they usually hide them badly. I was wrong. What I found in Solvang Ridge wasn't a case. It was a pattern. And patterns are dangerous things for a detective. Because once you see one, you can't unsee it. You start looking for it everywhere. In evidence, and witness statements, and the space between what people say and what they mean. The pattern I found was this. Every Tuesday, a mother and daughter disappeared. Same ages. 30 and 6, give or take a few months. No signs of struggle, no witnesses. Just gone, like they'd been erased from the world. I stayed in that town for 3 weeks. I interviewed everyone. I mapped timelines. I set up surveillance. I did everything right, everything by the book. I became obsessed with solving it, with stopping it before the next Tuesday came. Because if I could solve this case, if I could save just one pair, one mother and her daughter, then maybe. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened on Solvang Ridge. Let me tell you about the investigation that ended my career, my sanity, and any illusion I had left that the mind can be trusted. Because the truth is this. I drove to that town looking for missing people, and what I found instead was myself. Or rather, the hollow place where myself used to be. The brain is a liar, and I've been lying to myself for longer than I knew. Sheriff Dwight Hackett had the kind of face that looked weathered by more than sun. Deep lines ran from his nose to his jaw, and when he shook my hand outside the station, his grip was firm but distracted. "Appreciate you coming out here, Detective Brennan," he said. "This thing's got us stumped." The station was a single-story building with beige stucco peeling at the corners. Inside, Deputy Ramona Voss sat at a desk covered in papers, her dark hair pulled back in a barn that had started to come loose. She was younger than Hackett, maybe mid-30s, with tired eyes that suggested she hadn't slept well in days. "Coffee?" she offered, already standing. "Black's fine." She poured from a pot that looked hours old. The coffee tasted burned, but I drank it anyway. Hackett spread a file across the desk between us. "Marissa Chen and her daughter Lily," he said, tapping a photograph. "Disappeared last Tuesday morning. Marissa was 31, worked remotely for some tech company. Lily was 6, homeschooled." The photo showed a woman with glasses and a cautious smile, her daughter pressed against her side, gap-toothed and grinning. Normal, unremarkable, the kind of photo you'd find in any family album. "When were they reported missing?" I asked. "Tuesday afternoon," Voss said. "Marissa's mother called from Sacramento. They had a standing video call every Tuesday at noon. When Marissa didn't answer, her mother tried the landline, the cell, even contacted neighbors. Nobody had seen them since Monday evening. I studied the file. No forced entry, no struggle. The house had been neat. Beds made, dishes washed. Marissa's car was still in the driveway. Her purse was on the kitchen counter, wallet and phone inside. "What about the father?" I asked. "No father in the picture," Hackett said. "Marissa raised Lily alone. Moved here 2 years ago for the quiet," she told people. "Friends? Enemies? Anyone acting strangely around them?" Boss shook her head. "We interviewed everyone in town. Marissa kept to herself mostly, but people liked her. She volunteered at the library sometimes. Lily played at the park. Nothing unusual, no threats, no problems." I made notes, my pen moving across the paper in practice strokes. "Security cameras?" "We've got exactly 3 in the whole town," Hackett said with a bitter smile. "Gas station, bank, in the post office. Checked them all. Nothing." "Dogs?" "Brought in the K9 unit from El Centro. Tracked them from the house to the road. Then the scent just stopped. Like they got into a vehicle, but nobody saw one." I closed the file and looked at both of them. "You've done good work here. Thorough. So, why call me in? What aren't you telling me?" Hackett and Voss exchanged a glance. She spoke first. "There was another case, 5 years ago, before either of us worked here." She pulled out a second file, older, the edges worn. "Danielle Ruiz and her daughter Sophia. Same thing. Woman in her 30s, daughter age 6. Disappeared on the Tuesday. Never found." My stomach tightened. And 9 years before that," Hackett continued quietly. "Patricia Oakes and her daughter Emma. Also Tuesday. Also never found." I sat back in the plastic chair processing. 3 cases, 14 years apart, then 9, then 5. The intervals were shrinking. "You think they're connected?" I said. "We think someone's hunting them," Voss said. "And we think he's going to do it again." I looked down at the photographs. 3 pairs of faces, 3 mothers and daughters, all with the same expression of ordinary happiness that comes before tragedy erases it. "When's the next Tuesday?" I asked. Hackett checked his watch. 6 days. "Then we'd better get to work." The Chen house sat at the end of Mesquite Drive, a pale yellow ranch with a brick planter box full of dead marigolds. I stood in the doorway Thursday morning, Voss beside me, both of us wearing latex gloves. "Everything's exactly as we found it," she said. I walked through slowly, taking in details. The living room had a couch with throw pillows arranged neatly. A bookshelf held children's picture books on the lower shelves, business text on the upper ones. On the coffee table sat a half-finished puzzle, a lighthouse scene, maybe 200 pieces completed. In the kitchen, 2 bowls rest in the dish rack, cereal boxes in the pantry, milk in the fridge with 4 days left before expiration. A calendar on the wall showed appointments: dentist, library shift, swimming lessons that would never happen. "What about the previous victims' houses?" I asked. "Long gone. Ruiz place was sold 6 months after they disappeared. Oak's family home is a vacant lot now, burned down in the brush fire 3 years back." I moved down the hallway to the bedrooms. Lily's room had walls painted lavender, stuffed animals on the bed, crayon drawings taped above a small desk. One drawing showed a woman and girl holding hands beneath the yellow sun. The word "Mama" was written in wobbly letters at the bottom. Marissa's room was sparse. A queen bed with a wedding ring quilt, a nightstand with a lamp, reading glasses, and a worn paperback mystery novel. I opened the closet, clothes organized by color, shoes lined up beneath. Everything orderly, controlled. She was careful, I said. What do you mean? Single mother, new town, raising a daughter alone. She built structure, routines, safety. I gestured around the room. People like this don't just disappear. They have contingency plans, backup systems. But there were no signs of struggle, no indication she'd packed to leave. Her laptop was on the kitchen counter, password protected. Voss had already tried to get into it. The tech unit in El Centro was backed up for weeks. We left the house and drove through town. Solvang Ridge was the kind of place where buildings outnumbered people. A post office with an American flag snapping in the dry wind. A diner called Maze that advertised breakfast all day. A library that was only open 3 days a week. The gas station sold hunting licenses alongside candy bars. I had Voss taken to the previous victim's last known locations. The Ruiz house was now occupied by an elderly couple named the Kowalskis, who knew nothing about the prior residents. The Oaks property was just scorched earth and scattered foundation stones, surrounded by a chain-link fence. That afternoon, I interviewed townspeople at May's Diner. The owner, a woman named Francine with silver hair and nicotine-stained fingers, poured coffee and talked. Marissa was quiet but polite, she said. Came in sometimes for pancakes with Lily. The girl loved chocolate chips in hers. Did you notice anyone paying extra attention to them? Francine thought about it, stirring sugar into her own cup. Everybody notices newcomers here, but nobody was creepy about it, if that's what you're asking. I spoke with the librarian, a retired teacher named Gerald Sumter who had thick glasses and ink stains on his fingers. He remembered Marissa volunteering to organize the children's section. She mentioned wanting Lily to have structure, he said. Said it was important for kids to have routines that could count on. By evening, I'd talked to 17 people. Nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything. Marissa and Lily had simply ceased to exist sometime between Monday night and Tuesday morning. I sat in my motel room, the Sage Motor Lodge, Solvang Ridge's only accommodation, and spread my notes across the peel and veneer desk. 3 cases, same pattern. Mothers and daughters, always on Tuesday, always without trace. The problem with patterns is they suggest intention. Random crimes don't repeat with such precision. This was someone who planned, who watched, who waited for the right moment. I needed to find the connection between victims. Why these women? Why their daughters? What made them targets? My phone buzzed, a text from Boss. Found something. Come to station. I grabbed my jacket and headed out into the desert night, where the stars were so bright they looked close enough to touch. 4 days until Tuesday. The station was dim when I arrived, just the desk lamp casting yellow light across Voss's tired face. She had papers spread out in front of her, and when she looked up, there was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. What did you find? I asked. She pushed a photograph toward me. This was in the archives, from the Oaks case. The photo showed Patricia Oaks and her daughter, Emma, standing in front of the library. They were both smiling, Patricia's hand resting on Emma's shoulder. But that wasn't what Voss wanted me to see. Look at the background, she said. I squinted at the image. Behind the mother and daughter, partially visible through the library window, was a bulletin board, and pinned to that board was a flyer. I could just make out the words, Tuesday Reading Circle. All 3 victims, Voss said, pulling out more documents, were connected to Tuesday activities. Patricia Oaks ran a Tuesday reading group at the library. Danielle Ruiz took her daughter to Tuesday swimming lessons at the community center. And Marissa Chen had a standing Tuesday video call with her mother. I felt something click in my mind. Tuesday isn't random. It's when they were most visible, most predictable. Exactly. Someone was watching the routines, knew exactly when and where they'd be. I sat down heavily in the chair across from her. Have you identified any other mother-daughter pairs in town with Tuesday routines? Her face went pale. 3. There are 3 other pairs that match the age range who have regular Tuesday activities. Names. She consulted her notes. Rebecca Ortega and her daughter Carmen. They go to the farmer's market every Tuesday morning. It's small, just a few vendors, but they never miss it. Then there's Yuki Tanaka and her daughter Hana. Tuesday piano lessons in El Centro, been going for 6 months. And she hesitated. And Nina Sawyer and her daughter Becca. They volunteer at the animal shelter every Tuesday afternoon. I wrote down all 3 names. We need to talk to them, warn them, maybe set up protection. Hackett already tried reaching the Sawyers, then not answering the phone. My pulse quickened. What do you mean, not answering? I mean, Nina was supposed to open the shelter this morning. She has keys. She never showed. Her car's in her driveway, but nobody's home. I was on my feet immediately. What's today? Thursday. When did you last confirm visual contact with them? Voss checked her notes, and I watched the color drain from her face. Tuesday morning. Francine at the diner saw them having breakfast around 8. We drove to the Sawyer house in silence, Hackett meeting us there with the patrol car's lights washing blue across the neighborhood. The house was a small cottage with peeling paint and a chain-link fence around a yard full of weeds. Hackett had already checked the perimeter. Doors locked, windows secure. No signs of forced entry. Break it down, I said. He gave me a look but didn't argue. 3 solid kicks and the door frame splintered. We went in with flashlights, calling out names that echoed back unanswered. The house was similar to the Chen residence. Neat, orderly, lived in. Breakfast dishes in the sink, beds made, backpack sitting by the front door ready for school that Becca would never attend. In the kitchen, a calendar showed Tuesday marked with shelter 2 p.m. in red ink. Yesterday. They disappeared yesterday, and we were only finding out now. Damn it, I whispered. Voss was in the living room looking at framed photos on the mantel. They look happy, she said quietly. I joined her. The photos showed Nina and Becca at various stages. Becca as a baby, as a toddler, recently with a gap in her front teeth just like Lily Chen. In every photo, Nina was smiling, her arm around her daughter, protective. We need to warn the others, I said. Ortega and Tanaka, right now. We split up. Hackett went to the Ortega's house while Voss and I drove to the Tanaka's place on the north side of town. It was a newer construction, stucco and tile roof, with a minivan in the driveway. Yuki Tanaka answered the door, looking worried. She was a small woman with sharp features and cautious eyes. Can I help you? I showed my badge. Detective Brennan, this is Deputy Voss. We need to talk to you about your safety. My safety? Her hand went to her throat. What's happened? We explained everything in her living room while her daughter, Hana, watched cartoons in the next room, oblivious. Yuki's face grew increasingly pale as we detailed the pattern, the disappearances, the Tuesday connection. So, You think someone is targeting mothers and daughters? She asked, her voice barely steady. We think you and Hannah might be at risk, I said. Do you have somewhere else you can stay? Family out of town? She shook her head. My parents are in Japan. My ex-husband, we don't speak. What about the piano lessons? Voss asked. Can you skip them next Tuesday? I can cancel everything, Yuki said immediately. We can stay inside, lock the doors. That didn't help the others, I said, then regretted how harsh it sounded. I'm sorry. I just mean we need to be smart about this. My phone rang. Hackett. The Ortegas are fine, he said when I answered. But Rebecca is scared out of her mind, wants to know if we can provide protection. Tell her we'll figure something out. We're at the Tanakas now. After I hung up, I looked at Yuki. We're going to keep you safe, both of you. Can you keep Hana home from school tomorrow? Stay inside. Don't answer the door for anyone except us. She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. Do you think you can catch whoever's doing this? I wanted to tell her yes. I wanted to promise I'd solve this before next Tuesday. But I'd learned a long time ago not to make promises I couldn't keep. We're going to try, I said instead. Outside, the desert wind had picked up, carrying dust across the empty streets. Voss and I stood by her patrol car, both of us processing what we'd just learned. 2 missing pairs in less than a week, she said. The pattern is accelerating. Or we just didn't notice before, I replied. The others might have vanished between the cases everyone knew about. She looked at me. You think there are more victims? Ones we don't even know about? I think we've only found the ones people reported. Single mothers new to town, keeping to themselves. How many could disappear before anyone noticed? The thoughts settled over us like the dust in the air. 5 days until the next Tuesday. 4 potential victims left. And I still had no idea who was taking them. Friday morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. and couldn't fall back asleep. The motel room felt too small, the walls pressing in. I kept seeing Nina Sawyer's face in those photographs, her arm around Becca, protective and loving, not knowing she had maybe days left before she'd vanish into whatever void had swallowed the others. I showered and drove to May's Diner before sunrise. Francine was there setting up, surprised to see me so early. Rough night? She asked, pouring coffee without asking if I wanted it. Need to ask you something, I said. The other disappearances, Ruiz and Oaks, do you remember them? She wiped down the counter with slow, circular motions. Wasn't here for the Oaks case. That was before my time, but I remember Danielle Ruiz, sweet woman. Sophia was a little firecracker, always singing. Did anything seem strange before they disappeared? Anyone asking about them? Francine thought about it, her weathered hands pausing mid-wipe. You know, there was a man. Came in a few times. Always sat where he could see the door. Ordered coffee, nursed it for hours. This was maybe a week before they vanished. My heart rate picked up. Can you describe him? Older, 50s maybe. Had a scar here. She traced a line along her jawbone. Drove a truck. Dark blue, I think. Never talked much, just watched. Did he tell the police this? Wasn't police then. Just old Sheriff Darrow. And he. She trailed off, uncomfortable. He what? He said I was imagining things. That grief makes people see patterns where there aren't any. I spent the morning digging through old case files in the station basement. Hackett had given me access to everything, boxes of documents going back 20 years. The Oaks file was thin, few witnesses, less evidence, but there were interview transcripts. One jumped out at me. A neighbor named Martin Cordova, who'd reported seeing a dark truck parked on the street several times in the weeks before Patricia and Emma disappeared. The investigator's notes dismissed it. Subject appears paranoid. No corroboration. I found Cordova's address in the current phone directory and drove to his house. He was an old man now, maybe 70, with trembling hands and eyes that looked haunted. I knew someone would come back eventually, he said when I introduced myself. Knew that man would do it again. Tell me what you saw. We sat in his living room, curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. He spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. He'd park at the end of the block, just sit there in his truck for hours. I noticed because I work nights, sleep days, so I'm up when most people aren't. He came 3-4 times a week for maybe a month before Patricia and Emma disappeared. Did you ever see his face? Once. I went out to get my mail and he was walking past. Had a scar in his jaw, hard eyes. He looked at me and smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was like he knew something I didn't. Did you see the truck again after they vanished? Cordova shook his head. Never. Like he just evaporated. I showed him photos of the other victims. His hand shook harder as he looked at them. He took all of them? He asked quietly. We don't know, but I think so. Why didn't anyone listen to me? It was a question I couldn't answer. I thanked him and left, my mind racing. A man with a scar, a dark truck, a pattern of surveillance before the disappearances. Finally, something concrete. I called Voss. We need to check registration records. Dark blue or black trucks, owned by men in their 50s with possible criminal records, assault, stalking, anything violent. That's going to take time. Then start now. We have 4 days. That evening, I met with Rebecca Ortega and her daughter Carmen at the station. Rebecca was a sturdy woman with worried eyes and work-rough hands. Carmen clung to her mother's side, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand it. I want to take her to my sister's place in Phoenix, Rebecca said. Just until this is over. That's a good idea, I said. When can you leave? Tomorrow morning. First light. Don't stop anywhere. Don't tell anyone where you're going except us. And call when you arrive. After they left, I sat in the conference room with Hackett and Voss, spreading out everything we had. Photos of victims, maps of the town, witness statements, registration records Voss was still compiling. 3 confirmed disappearances in the current cycle, I said, marking it on the timeline. Chen, Sawyer, and we have to assume Ruiz and Oaks followed similar patterns even if we didn't recognize it then. What about the intervals? Hackett asked. 14 years, then 9, then 5. It's accelerating. Which means if the pattern holds, the next cycle starts sooner. Maybe 3 years, maybe less. Voss looked up from her laptop. I've got 43 trucks registered in the county that match, but only 6 owners in the right age range with any kind of record. Start with those 6. Full background checks, current addresses, employment history. We worked until midnight. I drove back to the motel with my mind churning through possibilities. A serial killer who targeted mother-daughter pairs, who watched them for weeks, learned their routines, waited for the perfect Tuesday to strike. But how did he take them? Where were the bodies? Why no evidence? In my room, I spread my own notes across the bed. Something was bothering me, a detail I couldn't quite grasp. I looked at the photos of the victims again. Marissa and Lily, Nina and Becca, the others. All the daughters were 6 years old, give or take a few months. All the mothers were in their early 30s. The specificity suggested something personal. These weren't random victims. They represented something to the killer. A memory? A loss? Some trauma he was trying to recreate or revenge. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Stop looking. I stared at the screen, typed back, "Who is this?" No response. I called Voss immediately. "Someone just warned me off the case. Can you trace a number?" She took down the details. "I'll have the carrier pull records, but if it's a burner phone..." "I know, but try anyway." I couldn't sleep. Kept checking my phone, waiting for another message. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went for a walk. The town was dead quiet, just the wind and distant coyotes. I found myself standing outside the Chen house, staring at the dark windows. What had Marissa felt in those last moments? Had she known what was happening? Had she tried to protect Lily, or had it happened too fast for her to react? I thought about my own. I stopped myself, shook my head. Focus on the case. Focus on what you can solve. But standing there in the darkness, I felt something shift inside me. A crack in the foundation of certainty I'd built my career on. Because the truth was, I've been working this case for 3 weeks now, and there was no closer to finding these women than I'd been on day one. The mothers were always 30-something. The daughters always 6. Always Tuesday. Always without a trace. What if the pattern wasn't the key to solving it? What if the pattern was the trap? I walked back to the motel as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky. Saturday morning, 3 days until Tuesday. 2 potential victims left. Yuki and Hana Tanaka were still here. Rebecca and Carmen Ortega would be safely in Phoenix by now. Unless Rebecca hadn't made it to Phoenix. Unless the man with the scarred jaw was already watching the Tanakas. Unless I was missing something fundamental about this entire case. I lay down on the motel bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, and tried to remember the last time I'd slept through the night. Tried to remember when this case had stopped being an investigation and started being an obsession. Tried to remember why solving it felt like the most important thing I'd ever done. Saturday afternoon, Voss called with news. Found them. One of the 6 truck owners has a record. Assault charges from 15 years ago. Name's Vincent Harrow, age 54, lives on the property outside town minutes. What kind of assault? Domestic. Against his wife. She dropped the charges but left him anyway. Moved out of state with their daughter. My stomach tightened. How old was the daughter? According to DMV records from back then, 6. We drove out to Harrow's property with Hackett following in his patrol car. The place was 20 minutes from town, down a rutted dirt road that cut through scrubland. The house was a single-story ranch that had seen better days, paint stripped by sun and sand. A dark blue pickup truck sat in the driveway. We approached with hands near our weapons. I knocked on the door, identifying myself. No answer. Knocked again. The door opened slowly. Vincent Harrow stood there in a stained undershirt and jeans, barefoot, with bloodshot eyes that suggested either alcohol or lack of sleep. And there, running along his jaw, was a scar exactly where Francine and Cordova had described. "Vincent Harrow?" I asked. "Yeah." "Detective Bremen, these are Sheriff Hackett and Deputy Voss. Would like to ask you some questions." He looked at each of us, his expression unreadable. "About what?" "Missing persons cases. Can we come in?" He hesitated, then stepped back. The house smelled of cigarettes and old food, dishes piled in the sink, newspapers scattered across a coffee table stained with ring marks. We stood in the living room while Harrow lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "You know anything about women and children going missing in Saltvang Ridge?" I asked directly. "No." His voice was flat. "Your truck was seen near the homes of several victims before they disappeared. Lots of blue trucks around here. With your license plate?" He took a long drag. "I don't know what you're talking about." Hackett stepped forward. "Where were you Tuesday morning?" "Here. I'm always here." "Anyone who can verify that?" "I live alone." I walked slowly around the room, looking at details. Framed photos on the mantel. A younger Harrow with a woman and a small girl. The woman's face was turned away from the camera. The girl had pigtails and was laughing. I picked up the frame. "Your family?" I asked. Something flickered across his face. "Not anymore." "What happened to them?" "None of your business." A woman and daughter matching their ages disappeared Tuesday. Another pair the week before. You understand why we might be interested in your whereabouts? He stubbed out a cigarette. "I want a lawyer." We couldn't hold him without evidence, but Hackett stationed a deputy to watch the property. On the drive back, I felt both satisfied and frustrated. We'd found a suspect, but without proof, without witnesses, without bodies. We had nothing solid enough for an arrest. "He's our guy," Boss said. "I can feel it." "Feeling isn't evidence," I replied, though I agreed with her. That evening, I called home. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. My wife's voice. "Hi, you've reached the Brennan residence. Leave a message." I hung up without speaking. Tried again. Same result. A text from my wife came through. "Working late. Don't wait up." I stared at the message. Something about it felt wrong, but I couldn't place what. The phrasing, maybe? She usually wrote more than that, usually added something personal. I typed back, "Everything okay?" No response. I tried to remember when I'd last actually spoken to her. Not texted. Spoken. The memory felt slippery, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. We'd been busy, that was all. She understood. She always understood. Sunday morning, I met with Yuki Tanaka again. She looked like she hadn't slept either, dark circles under her eyes. "Hama keeps asking why she can't go outside," Yuki said. "I don't know what to tell her." "Tell her it's a game," I suggested. "Tell her you're practicing being safe." "She's 6. She's scared." 6 years old. Every victim's daughter had been 6. I thought about that number, how specific it was, how it had to mean something to the killer. A daughter he'd lost at that age, a trauma frozen in time. "We have a suspect under surveillance," I told Yuki. "A man named Vincent Harrow. Does that name mean anything to you?" She shook her head. "Never heard of them." "Have you noticed anyone watching you, following you? Any strange vehicles near your house?" "No. At least, I don't think so. I haven't been looking for things like that." After leaving the Tanakas, I drove back to Harrow's property, parking half a mile down the road. The deputy Hackett had assigned was still there, vehicle hidden behind a cluster of rocks. I radioed him. "Any movement?" He came out once around midnight, walked the perimeter, went back in. That's it. I watched the house through binoculars. The windows were dark. The truck hadn't moved. If Harrow was our killer, he was lying low. Maybe the visit from law enforcement had spooked him. Or maybe he was waiting for Tuesday, confident we couldn't stop him. My phone rang. Rebecca Ortega calling from Phoenix. "We made it," she said. "Carmen and I are safe at my sister's." "Good. Stay there at least until next weekend." "Will you call me? Let me know when it's over." I promised I would. One family safe, one still in danger. Monday, I barely left the station. Voss had pulled Harrow's complete history. Married young, had a daughter named Claire. Wife Ellen filed for divorce after the assault charge. They'd moved to Oregon 12 years ago. Ellen died in the car accident 5 years later. Claire would be 21 now, if she was still alive. "Think we should contact her?" Voss asked. "Do it, but carefully. She might not know anything, and I don't want to traumatize her." While Voss made calls, I reviewed everything again. The pattern, the timing, the victims. Harrell fit perfectly. The right age, the scar, the truck, the personal history of loss. But something nagged at me. The disappearances had been happening for longer than his divorce. The Oaks case was 18 years ago. He would have still been married then. Unless he'd started while married. Unless his wife had found out. Unless that was why she left. I needed more evidence. Something concrete that placed him at the crime scenes. But the victims' houses had been clean. No prints, no DNA, no signs of intrusion. Around 6 p.m., Hackett came into the conference room where I'd spread out files. "You should go back to the motel," he said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "I can't rest. Not yet." He sat down across from me. "Brennan, I've been doing this a long time. I've seen good detectives burn themselves out on cases they couldn't solve. Don't let this be one of them." "Someone is taking these women and children," I said. "Someone is making them vanish. If we don't stop it tomorrow, we will. We've got Harrow under surveillance. We've got the Tanakas protected. We're doing everything right." But were we? Something still felt off, like I was missing a crucial piece, like the whole picture was just slightly out of focus, and if I could just adjust my vision, everything would become clear. I went back to the motel, but didn't sleep. Sat at the desk going through my notes again. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke with my face pressed against the open case file, early morning light coming through the thin curtains. Tuesday. I checked my phone. 6:47 a.m. No messages from the deputy watching Harrow's property. No alerts from the system we'd set up at the Tanaka's house. Motion sensors, cameras, everything short of a full security detail. I texted Voss. "Status?" Her reply came immediately. "All quiet. Harrell hasn't moved. Tanakas are secure." I showered and dressed, feeling the weight of the day settling on my shoulders. This was it. Either we'd break the pattern today, or another mother and daughter would disappear into whatever darkness had swallowed the others. At 8 a.m., I was at the Tanaka's house with Voss. Yuki looked exhausted but determined. Hana was watching cartoons, oblivious to the tension. "We're going to stay here all day," I told Yuki. "You don't open the door for anyone but us. You keep your phone on. If anything feels wrong, even slightly wrong, you call immediately." She nodded. "What time is it usually? The disappearances?" "We don't know exactly, but most of them happen between morning and early afternoon, based on when they were last seen." "So by tonight?" "By tonight, you'll be safe." I positioned myself in the living room where I could see both the front door and the street. Voss stayed in the kitchen. We'd done everything we could. Secured the house, warned the family, had a suspect under surveillance. All we could do now was wait. The morning crawled by. Hannah played with dolls while Yuki sat rigid on the couch, hands clasped in her lap. Every sound from outside made her flinch. A bird landing on the roof, the wind rattling a loose shutter, a car passing on the distant main road. At 10 a.m., my phone rang. The deputy watching Harrow. Subject just left his property in the truck, heading toward town. My pulse spiked. Stay with him. Don't lose visual. I told Voss what was happening. She moved to the window, hand on her service weapon. He's coming for them, she said. Maybe. Or maybe he knows we're watching, and he's going about his day to look normal. But I didn't believe that. 15 minutes later, subject stopped at the gas station, filling up, still here. 20 minutes. Subject at May's Diner, just went inside. I paced the living room. Harrow was in town, moving freely, while we were locked in this house with the Tanakas. If he approached, we'd see him coming. We had the advantage. Noon came and went. Hannah ate lunch, peanut butter sandwich cut into triangles. Yuki barely touched hers. I drank coffee that had gone cold. At 1 p.m., subject back at his property, parked the truck, went inside. The Mitsanakas are still secure, boss confirmed. Maybe we'd done it. Maybe our presence, our surveillance, had broken the pattern. Maybe Harrow knew he couldn't act with us watching. 2 p.m., still nothing. 3 p.m., Anna fell asleep on the couch, her small body curled around the stuffed rabbit. Yuki stroked her daughter's hair with trembling fingers. "Is it over?" she whispered. "Let's wait until tonight to be sure," I said. But I was starting to believe it. We'd save them. We'd actually save them. At 4:17 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Brennan?" A voice I didn't recognize, official and somber. "Detective Brennan, this is Sergeant Walters from the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. I'm afraid I have some difficult news." The world tilted slightly. "What is it?" "It's about your wife and daughter, sir. We found them at your residence approximately 2 hours ago. I'm very sorry, but they're both deceased." The words didn't make sense. They were sounds without meaning, like a foreign language I'd never learned. "What?" "Your wife and daughter, Sarah and Emma. They were found in your home. It appears to be a murder-suicide. Your wife, there was a note. Sarah, Emma, my wife, my daughter." The room became very distant. I could see Voss looking at me with concern, could see Yuki frozen on the couch, could see Hannah sleeping peacefully. But they were all behind glass, separated from me by something I couldn't name. "That's not possible," I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "I spoke to Sarah yesterday. She texted me. Sir, I need you to come back to San Diego. There are questions." "She's not dead. You're wrong. Check again." "Detective Brennan." I hung up, stared at my phone, tried to call Sarah. The number I dialed went to a disconnected message. That was wrong. That was her number. I knew her number. I scrolled through my contacts, found her name, pressed call. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." Voss was at my side. "Luke? What happened?" "They said Sarah and Emma are dead, but they can't be. I talked to them like..." When had I at last actually spoken to them? Not texted. Spoken. I tried to remember our last conversation, tried to picture Sarah's face, Emma's smile. The memories were there, but they felt thin, like photographs that had been handled too many times, the images fading. Emma was 6 years old. Had been 6 years old for how long? My hands were shaking. I put the phone away before I could drop it. "I need to go," I said. "I need to go to San Diego right now." "Luke, sit down," Voss said gently. "You're in shock. Let me—" "Don't tell me I'm in shock." The words came out too loud. Hannah stirred on the couch. "My family isn't dead. This is a mistake. Or it's a trick. Maybe Harold did this to distract us, to get me away from here." But even as I said it, I knew it didn't make sense. Hackett arrived 20 minutes later. He took me outside, away from the Tanakas, away from Voss's worried eyes. "The San Diego sheriff called me too," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry, Luke. But you need to go home. Do you need to?" "This case," I said. "I need to finish this case. The Tanakas are safe. We'll stay with them. Voss and I will handle it. But Tuesday's almost over. They made it." I looked at my watch. 4:43 p.m. The sun was starting its descent toward the horizon. We'd protected them. We'd broken the pattern. But the victory felt hollow, felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. Hackett drove me back to the motel. I packed my bag mechanically, my hands doing things while my mind tried to process the impossible information. Sarah was dead. Emma was dead. Had been dead. Was going to be dead. The timeline didn't make sense. I sat on the motel bed, holding a photograph I kept in my wallet. Sarah and Emma, taken last summer. Sarah's hand on Emma's shoulder, both of them smiling. Emma was 6, had just turned 6, or was turning 6, or had been 6 for... How long have I been in Solvang Ridge? 3 weeks. That's what I'd told myself. 3 weeks on this case. I checked my phone for the date, November 12th. But when had I arrived? What date had that been? I couldn't remember. I looked at the photograph again, Sarah and Emma. But the more I stared at it, the more their faces seemed to blur, like looking at something underwater. My wife and daughter, dead, found in their home. But I've been here. I've been working this case. I've been saving other mothers and daughters because... The thought slipped away before I could catch it. Outside, the desert wind picked up, carrying dust against the window like fingers scratching to get in. I drove through the night, the highway stretching endlessly ahead. The headlights carved tunnels through the darkness that seemed to close in behind me. San Diego was 3 hours away, or 4. The distance kept changing in my mind. I tried calling Sarah again, disconnected. Tried Emma's tablet. We'd gotten her one for her birthday. The account didn't exist. My birthday? When was my birthday? I was 47. No, 48. Luke Brennan, detective, married to Sarah, father to Emma. Emma, who was 6 years old. How long had she been 6? The question lodged in my brain like a splinter. Children grow. They have birthdays. Emma had turned 6 in March, April. I couldn't remember the party, couldn't remember who'd been there. I pulled over at a rest stop, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Pulled out my phone and scrolled through photos. There were dozens of Emma at 6 years old, at parks, at home, eating ice cream, playing with toys. But I couldn't find any of her at 5 or 7, just 6, just like all the victims. My breath came faster. I opened the photos of Sarah. Recent ones showed her at 31, 32. But scrolling back, they jumped. 28, then suddenly 31 again, as if several years didn't exist. I got out of the car, paced the empty rest stop. A semi-truck rumbled past on the highway. The case. Focus on the case. I'd been investigating disappearances in Solvang Ridge. Mothers and daughters, always Tuesday, always without trace. I'd found patterns, interviewed witnesses, identified a suspect, Vincent Harrow, with a scarred jaw and dark truck. But why had I really gone to Solvang Ridge? Who had called me? I tried to remember the phone conversation, the request for help. The memory was there, but indistinct, like something remembered from a dream. I got back in the car and kept driving. Around 2 a.m., I passed a sign. San Diego, 47 miles. My exit would be Claremont. Sarah and I had bought our house there 8 years ago. Emma had been born in the bedroom we'd converted to a nursery. She'd taken her first steps in the living room. Except the memories felt rehearsed, like stories I'd told myself so many times they'd replaced the actual experiences. I took the Claremont exits and drove through familiar streets that felt foreign, turned on the Maple Drive. Our house was the fourth on the left, the blue one with the white trim. There was crime scene tape across the front door. I parked and sat staring at it. Yellow tape that said, "Sheriff's Line, do not cross." A house I'd lived in for years. A house where my wife and daughter had died today. Except, I made myself think it clearly. Except they hadn't died today. The sergeant's words came back. Murder-suicide, found 2 hours ago. But if they'd just died, why was I in Solvang Ridge for 3 weeks? Why hadn't anyone called me before today? Unless I'd never actually gone to Solvang Ridge. Unless I'd been here the whole time. Unless. I got out of the car on shaking legs and approached the house. The front door was locked, but I had keys. My hands fumbled with them. The tape tore as I pushed inside. The house was dark and smelled wrong. Stale air, something chemical. I flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. Tried another. The power was off. I used my phone's flashlight. The living room looked wrong. Furniture I didn't recognize. Dust covering everything. On the wall, a calendar showed February. February of 2 years ago. 2 years. I walked down the hallway to Emma's room. The door was open. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. The purple walls, the stuffed animals, the small bed with the flower print comforter. But when I touched the bed, dust puffed up in clouds. The stuffed animals were faded, sun-bleached. The walls had water stains from a leak in the ceiling that had never been fixed. Nobody had lived in this room for a long time. I sat on the dusty floor, my back against the wall, and made myself remember. Not the stories I'd told myself, the truth. Sarah and Emma had died 2 years ago. Not today. 2 years. There'd been a case, a real case, a missing woman and her daughter in a town 3 hours away. I'd gone to investigate. And while I was gone, while I was trying to save strangers, my own family had... The details came back in fragments. Sarah's depression after her mother died, her doctor's concerns, the medications that didn't work, me thinking work was more important, thinking I could solve everyone else's problems while ignoring what was happening in my own home. Coming back to find them, not knowing how to live with what I'd failed to prevent. So I built a case, a pattern, a mystery I could solve if I just worked hard enough, looked close enough, connected the right pieces. Mother-daughter pairs disappearing on Tuesdays, a case that would let me save them, over and over in different forms. Solvang Ridge didn't exist, or if it did, I'd never been there. The investigation had all been on my mind, A constructed reality where I could be the detective who saved families instead of the detective who'd failed his own. Vincent Harrell with his scarred jaw. The witnesses who confirmed my theories. The pattern that made perfect sense. All of it elaborate scaffolding built around one unbearable truth. My wife and daughter were dead, and I couldn't accept it. I sat in Emma's room until dawn broke through the dusty windows and finally let myself remember everything I'd been running from for 2 years. They found me 3 days later in Emma's room, dehydrated and talking to people who weren't there. Hackett and Voss from the San Diego Sheriff's Department, real officers I'd worked with years ago on an actual case, not the versions I'd invented in Solvang Ridge. The psychiatric evaluation was thorough. Dr. Reeves explained it to me like I was a child. Complicated grief, dissociative episodes, elaborate false memories constructed to avoid processing trauma. The mind protecting itself by creating a reality where I still had purpose, where I could still save people. The brain doesn't want to accept certain truths, she said, so it builds alternatives. I'd heard similar things from myself, back when I was investigating the case that wasn't real. The brain is a liar, I'd thought. I just hadn't realized I was talking about my own. The truth, when I finally let myself hold it without flinching. Sarah had struggled with depression for months after her mother's death. I'd been working a missing persons case in Imperial County, a real one, and was gone for 3 weeks. She'd called me twice during that time. I'd been too busy to call back, promising myself I would once I had a break in the case. She'd stopped taking her medication, made a decision, used a kitchen knife. Emma was at school when it happened, came home to find her mother in a scene no 6-year-old should ever see. Emma had called 911, had waited alone in the living room for the paramedics, for the police, for me. By the time I got there, Child Protective Services had already taken her. She'd been placed with Sarah's sister in Arizona temporarily while they contacted me. I never made it to Arizona. The case I'd been working had a break, a credible sighting of the missing woman. I told myself Emma was safe with family, that I'd get her after I'd closed this one case, but solving it mattered. 3 days later, Sarah's sister called. Emma had sleepwalked out of the house in the middle of the night. They'd found her at the bottom of the apartment complex pool in the morning. The investigation ruled it accidental, a tragedy compounded by trauma, a child so damaged by what she'd witnessed that even sleep couldn't protect her from it. I'd been chasing a lead on a missing person when my daughter drowned. 2 years ago, November. Every Tuesday since then, I've built the case again. Different details, different town, different names, but always the same. Mothers and daughters who need saving. Cases where if I just work hard enough, look close enough, I can prevent a loss. Dr. Reeves says the pattern will fade with treatment, that eventually I'll be able to remember Sarah and Emma without retreating into delusion, that I'll forgive myself for not being there when they needed me most. I don't believe her. Because here's what I know about patterns. Once you see one, you can't unsee it. And I keep seeing mothers and daughters everywhere I look. Keep noticing when they're together on Tuesdays. Keep feeling that pull to protect them, to watch over them, to make sure nothing happens. Last week I read about disappearances in a small town in Montana. A woman and her daughter, no signs of struggle, just gone. The article mentioned it was a Tuesday. I've been making calls, researching, planning the drive. Dr. Reeves would say I'm having another episode, that I'm retreating back into the constructed reality where I can be a hero instead of a failure. But she's wrong. This case is different. This one is real. It has to be. Because if I can just solve this one, if I can save just one mother and her daughter, then maybe Sarah and Emma didn't die for nothing. Maybe their deaths will mean something. Maybe I can find them and make it right. The brain is a liar, but sometimes lies are the only thing keeping us alive. I'm leaving for Montana tomorrow. It's Tuesday,